Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So, as most of you know, I'm founder of the Sentient Machines, and today here with us, we have a great pleasure of welcoming Dave Darcy. So, I think people in this industry usually know Dave, I think, from what I've heard. But Dave also has has amazing experience, decades of experience in this industry, and has won many awards actually. So being voted best world and EMEA, I think, director in contact center world, right, Dave, to 20.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
2020. Then his operation team has also won an award. I think 2020, so quite recent, right? So,
Yep.
You definitely know what you're doing, Dave. There.
Well, either that or I've been very lucky.
Well, you know what they say, you can be lucky, but you usually deserve to be lucky as well. So that's how it usually goes. But yeah, we decided, well, not decided, when we were looking like at the title, we said, we actually named it "Forgiveness is Easier Than Permission," and I thought we could start actually with that, because I thought that was quite an interesting insight, because when we were talking, because I know Tim Ferriss, for example, says something like permission. You need to give permission to your team to make decisions, because otherwise, you outsource the decision and you just give them a budget. And then I think in his book he used a very small budget and then kept increasing, and was talking about how that actually worked very well for him and his business and everything. And I think your concept was kind of similar but different. So maybe I thought we could start with that maybe.
Yeah, sure. I think it is certainly very similar, but there is perhaps less tight parameter around it. I think it's worthy of starting by explaining the forgiveness over permission ethos is something much more than just a workplace thing. It's something that kind of has adapted as my approach to life, really, in that when you go to somebody and ask them for their permission to do something, frequently what they will do is they'll try and talk you out of that, and that might be driven by their own fear or fearful you or a budgetary constraint or whatever it is, but they'll try and convince you that that's not what the thing to do. And so I adopted this idea that, it was much easier to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I did this, it didn't work, I'm really sorry, but, and find the solution. Or, hey, I did this, I know it's outside process, but it was a great success. Rather than go and ask for that permission up front. I think the major difference between what Tim Ferriss suggests and what I suggest, and I did try for a period of time that kind of model of having a constraint or a parameter or a boundary around which I would set these rules for the team that were, do what you think is the right thing to do, and if you get it wrong, we'll ask me for forgiveness and it will be granted, and but do the right thing. And the reason I removed that kind of financial constraint was that what I found was that if I gave my team members a financial budget upon which they could make a decision up to that, then over a period of time, what I found was almost every decision that got made was about at that figure. And it was almost that they were no longer in a position of doing what they felt was necessarily the right thing for the customer, so much as adhering to an agreed policy. And so I've moved that to a different statement now, and it's now do what you would do if it was your business. And I think that gives the team members an opportunity to really rationalize what decision it is that they're going to make and how they're going to deliver that, and to have in their minds that they're not going to do anything ridiculously business damaging, because if they adhere to the rule that do what you would do if it was your business, then typically what will be done is that the customer will be offered a solution that works well for the customer, but also for the business. And it works very well. I find it's a huge success.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think you ran the experiment even when you were like, gave them the set amount and not, and then it's very interesting to actually see, the amount, the difference. It's almost like people, when they take responsibility, it's like they can, I think everyone secretly needs, like a little bit of I don't want to call it power, but to feel responsible to do something extraordinary. And if you're just in the background, it's not nearly as much fun.
It's very close to power. It's about giving them empowerment. It's about saying, this is your decision. Do what is right for the customer. Do what you would do if it was your business. And you know what? People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, we'll talk about it. We'll understand how the mistake was made. We will all learn from it, and we will move on. And it works brilliantly well. And I think, as I touched on at the beginning, it's not just about work. It's every aspect of life. I joke about the fact that, if I were to ask my wife if I can do some of the things that I'd like to do, she'd probably say no. But when I come home and say, hey, sorry, I stayed out and had that extra beer, she forgives me. And it works in every walk of life. And it is just about helping people to understand that they're not entirely constrained. And if you put that budgetary limit of £100, as Tim Ferriss might have suggested, then you're not empowering people, you're partially empowering them. You're saying to them, you can make this decision up to, but only up to that limit. Now, if that individual is in a discussion with a customer, that fix could be put in place instantly by that individual saying, okay, look, I can offer you this solution and it's going to cost £150. Do it. Because the learning that, if they're making a mistake, the learning that £50 has cost is well and truly valuable because it was only £50. And if they haven't made a mistake, they've given the customer an instant solution to their problem, and therefore that £50 investment was undoubtedly worth it. And so it's about balancing the learning experience versus the customer experience.
I've been working with a lot of teenagers recently in lockdown and running a mental health program. And we talk about giving them agency. And that's the word that I think the psychologists use, especially in teenage years, giving people agency. And it sounds very much as if you're making sure they have agency over the project they're working on.
Absolutely. I've not heard that before, Hugh, but that's absolutely the right way.
Yeah, love the concept. Great.
Interesting. So, and often, I mean, these customer-facing staff, I mean, are typically under a lot of pressure to kind of deliver things. They are measured, like there's lots of KPIs, to hit the targets. I think with sales, it's as difficult as with like support. And, to follow the policies, to follow the regulations, to do the right thing. And then at the end, we all have been very frustrated customers. So it's actually a big challenge for them to face. So I think you were talking about kind of balancing and being, you letting them use the common sense and, letting them make a decision to use their common sense, even if that means mending the process, because sometimes I remember your sofa example, the company has spent much more money on you at the end because of the process. So what is your view on this, and how, I mean, what is the best way? Because obviously no one wants to break the policies, of course, and regulations, but there are some processes and systems that might actually be maybe outdated, not very optimal, and so on. So how do you, what's your view on that?
My view on this is that, for me, process and policy, another way we could frame them is that they're rules. And somebody told me many, many years ago that rules are for idiots, and for the rest of us, they are guidance. And I think, to me, that's the approach that I would take to my team. If the process is wrong for what the customer requires, and therefore wrong for what the business requires, change it. There's no reason. It's idiocy for us to continue to do something that we know is not good for us and is upsetting our customer. So do it differently, and then come and ask for forgiveness. And you know what? In doing it differently, you might find that you designed the right process and that you introduced the right policy. But we'll discuss it. And if it hasn't been the right decision, well, we'll grant the forgiveness and we'll start again. And it's all about a learning experience. I tell people, have done for years, I mean, very relevant to you and I in our personal situations at the moment. A child, your daughter, my grandson, will learn to walk by falling over and then learning not to fall over. And so if we try to stop that child from falling over, they'll never properly learn to walk. Allow them to make their mistakes. So I think the balance is absolutely around, the processes, the policies. They're there for good reason. They're there with good forethought, but sometimes they don't match the circumstance. And we shouldn't religiously stick to a process or policy that is actually hindering the relationship that we have with our customer blindly just because it's our process or policy. We need to question whether it's the right thing to do or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That reminded me of when on this skiing lesson, the first thing they were teaching us was how to fall down before anything else. So it's like, oh my God, how do you do that? But yeah, that's exactly.
Absolutely. It's like when they teach, not that I've ever done this, when they teach you a parachute, the first thing they teach you to do is land. It's kind of fundamentally important.
Yeah, no, amazing. So but it's always tricky, I guess, with how people feel and how capable they are, how trained they are, and how they make decisions at a certain point of time. But I think we touched upon this like a little bit when we spoke around training and just general happiness of staff. And I know that you're a big fan of like customer satisfaction and like just customer happiness in general and everything. And I remember in Vonage you implemented very, very sophisticated approach of like measuring, okay, is this really the agent's kind of measure, or is this my company's measure, or like just business resolution in general? And I think that gave a lot of useful insight. But I think a lot of companies are trying to measure kind of almost relentlessly like NPS and customer satisfaction and things like this. But I do feel, and I know you are the big fan of this because you mentioned the agent happiness, the staff happiness in general playing a big role. But I think as with everything, it's like sometimes you need to convince the management that that's something that's going to tip the scales and that's going to impact the CSAT, and you don't have a chart that shows that directly. So to tell us a bit about this.
Well, I think let's start with what are the good measures and what are the bad measures. And frankly, I don't know that there are necessarily any bad measures, but we work in a field that is very different to certain other fields that get measured. So if you have to look at a sports environment, for example, the measure that determines who's doing best in the Premier League is how many points they have, and that's the end of the matter. We have many different measures that we can use within our businesses to say that we have a higher level of customer satisfaction, we have a higher net promoter score, we have a greater level of availability or optimization within our tools and so on. And so we can choose. And I think so that's the first point. I think NPS for me is massively important. I think, but it's massively important because it gives me that Premier League table ability to measure myself against my competitors. And that's all it really does. It tells me how I am performing in comparison with somebody else. Where that leads me to, and this was something that came to mind as a result of the work that we did together in creating the measurements at Vonage, was that everybody talks about happy employees make happy staff make happy customers, and I don't think many of us would disagree with that. I think that there are some rules and bits around that, but ultimately it's a generally agreed conception that if you have happy staff, you will have happy customers. And I presented this just a couple of weeks ago at the Contact Center World EMEA conference. In that, we spend a lot of time analyzing what our staff say to our customers, and what our customers say to our staff, and the tone and so on, and whether the customer's happy and whether the process worked for the customer, and so on and so forth. And it's all valuable. But it dawned on me then that if happy staff make happy customers, why are we starting with the customer? Why don't we start with the staff? Because if we then start to look at employee engagement, if we start to look at staff morale, if we start to look at the things that make somebody want to do their job, then naturally, if we are right that happy staff make happy customers, then we're going to start to see more and more happy customers. And so for me, the starting measurement needs to be around employee engagement. It needs to be around employee satisfaction. It needs to be around employee effort. And so where I'm looking to go now at Ring Central is very much more around measuring two things. One being the employee satisfaction, and the other being the customer effort, because customers don't really have an interest in our process or our policy. What they have an interest in is how difficult is it for them to resolve the issue or find the answer to the question that they have. So yeah, I've kind of started to change my world away from or understanding the difference between the measures that give me a benchmark upon which to compare myself with my competitors versus a measurement and a process that allows me to deliver the best service to my customer.
Yeah, absolutely, and that probably is gonna, increase your NPS and, make you.
Well, you would hope so.
Well, it's all about genuine. Like, if I can just use the analogy, like sometimes people ask us, like, do you provide real-time feedback to agents, or is it offline? And I say, we've been asked this question so many times, we never deployed it, and I always said, online, like you can't just say to someone, be happy, or
absolutely
go be happy and answer the question, or just use this word and it's going to work, this magical word, amazing, perfect, or whatever. I think there's much more in kind of the fundamentals, or like the person, their communication, or all these things that I think would then translate, of course. If I'm genuinely happy, I think I always talk about Bhutan, and I think I was always thinking, why was I so impressed? Like, I've never been impressed, and I honestly think it's this content from the actual people. Like, I didn't even interact with a lot of them, but they just were so content, so kind of happy with themselves, even when they were not talking, that it already made me feel good, even though like I didn't interact with all of them. So I think that is kind of what it boils down to. So I think it's very interesting.
I think it casts my mind back to two things. One being, and you touched on earlier that I've been in this industry many years, and when I think back to the beginning, I remember walking in and working in contact centers where there were messages on the wall of things like "smile down the phone." Help me to smile down the phone, help me to feel like I want to smile, and the smile down the phone may well work, but if it's genuine, it's going to work better. And similarly, I saw in some of my work around the world in different cultures, the same thing: smile down the phone, stand up when you're talking, be a happy voice to your customer. Well, as an employer, as a team leader, as a leader of the business, it's my responsibility to make you want to smile.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's people can feel, I think, if something is genuine or if it's just like a pretend.
Of course.
So I think
we've all met that person, haven't we? That smiles and greets us, and you can see that behind that smile, it's not really there.
Yeah, exactly. So
actually, I think again, the psychologists, I think that there's two types of smiles that the psychologists look at. One is called a Duchenne smile. I think that's a fake smile. It's a great, and actually, I read this paper on happiness, and you can almost predict happiness by looking at people and the way they smile. If they do that kind of gritted teeth, the mental health problems follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, be happy. Be happy.
No, that's definitely the case. So I just welcoming everyone who's joined us recently, and we'll just continue or the conversation with Dave, but do ask any questions if you have. Just unmute your microphone at any point and just ask a question. Feel free to jump in. So before the next point, I was going to bring up, which is very close to my heart. You mentioned KPIs, and I'm very interested in this because I like to measure everything. Because they do say, what you can't measure, you can't improve. So what are your kind of favorite measures when it comes to your team? Even if you're creating a team, running a team, again, I think these people have a very, very difficult job. Like we're talking about happiness. I mean, COVID has like accelerated mental health issues and, of the customers. But then what about, people who actually have to deal then engage in these conversations with people with those issues and stuff like this. So what are your kind of, I guess, favorite KPIs to measure the performance of your team, but also as a whole, but also individuals?
I think that it comes back to my comments earlier that there are different types of measures, and absolutely, yeah, I've not taken on some kind of new world hippie type lifestyle to managing a business. There are still the key metrics that are required for me to know whether the business is performing or not. So I have the same standard measures around work throughput, work in progress, effectiveness and efficiency and so on, just as anybody else. So yeah, I know what my abandonment rate is in my centres. I know what my first contact resolution is. I know all those things are outputs, and they're key for me to understand whether the business is performing well or not. And that's terrific. But they are just that, they are outputs. They are the tools that allow me to measure. I have to choose with that information, what am I going to do if I need to change anything? And the change that has come in my time in my role now at Ring Central has been one that's moved away from, okay, my first contact resolution has dipped by 1% or whatever the number might be. And so now I'm going to go and check what it is in the process, what the drivers are that caused that drop, and look at that in isolation. Whereas now, whilst that is still relevant to me, what's equally relevant to me is, how were the people on those days? What happened? Was there a change in mood? Did the weather change? And it all sounds ridiculous because I can't change the weather, for example. But ultimately, what I can be aware of is that if the general mood within my team is dipping, I can be pretty confident I'm going to see a similar dip in the outputs that are my business measures. And so it comes back again to my point that happy staff, happy customers, well, happy staff, happier metrics. It's becoming a real success for us. And I was very fortunate enough in my time working in my previous company that I was employed by a managing director whose whole focus was, I'm not interested in your input, I'm interested in your output. Well, that was great for him because he wanted to see how the business was being operated. I was far more interested in the input because that was what was going to affect the output. And so, some of these metrics, some of the things that I'd like to measure are subjective. But as I touched on earlier, employee engagement, employee satisfaction are things that you need to find a way of measuring, and that can be done through regular temperature checks, through more formal employee engagement surveys, and certainly as we've gone through the dreadful last 18 months of a pandemic, as a director of this area of our business, it's become more and more important for me that I speak to not just my direct reports, but their direct reports and their direct reports on a regular basis, to do nothing more than just check in and say, how are you? I'm particularly touched by the fact that I have in my Paris office, I have an intern who has recently transferred from intern to become a permanent employee, and told me that a large part of making that decision was that she liked the fact that layers above her in the organization reached out to say, hi, how are you?
Wow, yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think that's kind of is what people forget. I think working online, working remotely, I think it has just worsened the situation with that. So has everyone, though, you just said that he can't hear Dave very well. Is everyone okay with hearing Dave and myself?
Hi, Danica, it's Shahid.
Shahid?
Hello, I've got a couple of questions for Dave, if I may.
Yes, please.
The first thing is, I used to work on a service desk, an ERP service desk many years ago. And one of the mantras that the management always had, and I want to know if it's still the case and how you manage it now, is that you shouldn't keep people working on service desks longer than 18 months to 2 years, because the job can become quite tiring and repetitive, etc. So you need to keep your service agents fresh and give them some kind of progression path. So how would you recommend a good organization manages, that issue? The second is, I think in the pandemic experiences, a lot of us have been, how shall I put it? We've had a buffer put between us and humans in terms of chatbots and various other automated IVR responses, and it's led to a decline in actual customer service interaction. And I just want to know, because I'm racking my brain, I can't remember a time when I can say a chatbot or automated IVR or something has met or exceeded my service expectations, but that's not the case with humans. They quite often meet or exceed your expectations. So how do you bridge that gap as well? Those two questions. Thank you.
Sure. So I think they're great questions. And yes, certainly I've encountered the environment of people within a service desk environment shouldn't be there for over a certain period of time. And my response to that has always been the same, really, and that is we're not clones. We don't all come as one shape, size, so on and so forth. And I have people within my team now, and I've had people in my teams over the last 25 plus years who really love working on the service desk and have done exactly that throughout their careers. They've become great people in terms of imparting knowledge to others. They're experts at what they do. They get great satisfaction from doing it, and can't envision themselves ever doing anything else. And then there are people who, after 9 months of doing a good job, are eager for their next challenge. And I don't think it's unique to a service desk environment. I think that I haven't worked on a desk for many, many, many years, but I know that I have a cycle in my mentality that gets me to a point after X amount of time in a particular role where I start to look for the next challenge, whether that be within that function, within that business, or somewhere else. And I think it's about the nature of the individual rather than the requirement of the business. And I think it comes back to the need for people to be, if happy staff make happy customers, then the rotation, the period of time that somebody stays in one job is unique to that individual. And that will drive their happiness and their satisfaction in their role, and therefore will lead on to presenting that happiness and satisfactions in the customer's experience. So I think that would be my view on that. On regard to through the pandemic and the introduction and use of greater degrees of AI and bots and so on, and the impact on customer satisfaction, I agree wholeheartedly with you that I don't think I've ever encountered a bot or a piece of AI that has exceeded my expectation. I think I've encountered many, many examples that have absolutely met my expectation. And I think that's the purpose of AIs and bots. I think that personality, that empathy that can come through from a human cannot be replaced by a bot, and we shouldn't attempt to do so. But I think the most important aspect of it is, and I talked about it earlier, is customer effort. And I think if an AI or a bot is making the customer have to put less effort in, then I think that's a hugely successful thing to do. If it actually is frustrating the customer and making the customer put more effort in, it's ineffective. It's not working, it's not achieving its aim, and therefore I would look to question whether it should be there or not. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, it did.
And maybe as a follow-up on that, because I think I'm also very interested. Well, we've all been in a situation, like I always say, can I please talk to a human, please? And actually, recently we've been doing some analysis where I was surprised how much of that was in the data, and it's almost like some customers just start with that because they've probably been trying to get in touch and so on. It's almost like the first thing they say is, can I please talk to a human? But of course, chatbots have, I think from all the AI solutions, chatbots have been those that kind of have, ROI proven from day one, because, you cut this, it's like this is to prove. But of course, it goes down to the implementation of this. And I think that Hugh is there nodding because he's been involved in so many. So when it comes to technology and we can endlessly talk about like just how you actually build the chatbot that works, but when it comes to technology in general and AI, I think for me AI is like it's kind of a technology on top of kind of what we've been having. It's like a recent advancement, I think, on top of everything we've had. So how do you go about like deciding, what is the next thing that can help me, and how do you, and especially with AI, usually with AI you need kind of a little bit of time. Sometimes it's 1 month, sometimes it's a year to actually get things running properly, get all the learnings through and so on. So how do you go about I guess choosing what technology to give to your team so that they can outperform or like get better results, and kind of, do you have any?
Yeah, I think primarily the first question is, what do you want the technology for? And so if the intent of the technology is to make the employee experience smoother, to enhance their knowledge, to enable them to provide the customer with the solution that they require faster, then make it deliver that. If your requirement is that you want to use AI to enhance your customer experience, make it do that. However, if your expectation is that you're going to implement AI so as to reduce your cost base, be honest about that. And don't expect the AI that is being introduced to primarily reduce your cost base to as a byproduct improve your customer satisfaction. It may not reduce your customer satisfaction, but if your expectation is that I'm putting this in place because it will save me X amount of money, then that's what it's there for. Don't try and dress it up as being we're doing this to make life better for our customers, because no, we're not. We're doing it to drive down our cost, and be honest about that. And if it is we're doing this to make life better for our customers, then make sure it does make life better for the customer. And again, with regard to happy staff, happy customers, if the AI you're implementing is there to assist your staff, ensure it does. Because if it frustrates them, it'll make them less happy. Guess what? That's going to make your customer experience less promising. That's going to impact your NPS, that is the score that I use to compare me with my competitors.
Just a suggestion, it's Shahid again. Just as a follow-up to my questions, I think chatbots and AI are wonderful augmentation for a service desk. Unfortunately, I think mine isn't a unique experience. I think a lot of organizations are just using it as a buffer now and additional headcount to keep distance between them and loads and loads of customers. But I would really think it'd be a great idea that best practice would include anybody who's running these kind of tools should encourage the CEO or the the head of customer experience at that organization to every week to go through their IVR or their service desk independently and experience what their customers are experiencing.
Mm.
No, I think that for people who are running an organization, they need to understand what the customer experience is. And so, yeah, I'd fully endorse that. I think something else I was taught many years ago is, the idea of something like AI comes about because somebody put the idea in the head of the chief customer officer or the chief information officer or the CTO or the CEO or whoever else it might have been. So the way to make it most effective is to speak the language of the boardroom. So understand who your influencers are, who the people who are going to make those decisions are, speak in a language that helps them to understand what benefit it's going to give to the business. But be conscious of the fact that if you're talking to the CFO, in all likelihood, the CFO's concern is going to be, how can we make the business more profitable? And therefore, you need to be able to bring that conversation back to that. So can you make the business more profitable by implementing AI that will give the customer an ease of service, so less effort in their service, which will encourage more customers to come on board, which will mean you need you can service your customers more efficiently, and therefore the business can become more profitable. Because if that CFO's mindset is, I'll introduce this AI because it will mean I can have less agents and therefore I'll reduce my cost, and that's the win, that's what it will deliver. It won't deliver an improved customer experience. It will improve a cost reduction. It will introduce a cost reduction.
So I was just listening to the conversation. It's not the paradox of the chatbot that actually it is creating some kind of human interface or natural language interface to whatever your information you're trying to serve, and is imitating a human. But at the same time, the people interacting with the chatbot want to know that it's a chatbot, and they change their behavior if they know it's a chatbot. They change it slightly and reduce the complexity of the language with which they use to interact with the chatbot. So kind of adjusting so it's imitating a human, but you have to tell the people interacting with the chatbot that it isn't a human and adjust your expectations downward. There's the kind of negotiation there between the person coming to try and get the information or the service and the service, the chatbot itself. There's kind of paradox there, is it not? That you're trying to have a chatbot imitate a human, but the human needs to know that it's not a human, it is actually a machine, and reduce your expectations. I think this is a comment there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that it reminds me, Hugh, of playing golf with my father some years ago, and he had to call into a centre to book a repair on his washing machine, and he was absolutely blown away by the fact that this robot, as he put it, could understand what he was telling them, particularly with his broad Dublin accent, and thought that was incredible. Now, some years later, he would tell the story of how infuriating he finds them because he knows he's not talking to a human. So I think, we go through that learning curve, don't we? Where this is really impressive. This is a bit of new tech, and I love it. To actually, I don't like this anymore. But I think the other thing is that I find it quite interesting that we're probably 10 plus years into AI now, or the introduction of AI in its first instance. And still, if you say AI, most people still think we're talking about a chatbot or an IVR.
Yeah, it's the films, isn't it? It's like we are all expecting these robots to come around and either kill us or do everything that we do just better, and all of these things. So yeah, I think absolutely. So you were talking about, when you're selling AI, you need to talk about, imagine you're at the board meeting and you're giving all the numbers. But I think another interesting side is also the team you're trying to, because there's a lot of, I think, fear, and I think it's been changing. But I know certainly and I think chatbots, are there because there isn't enough people. Like, you can't literally employ so many people. That's why everyone is like rushing to chatbots. It's like holy grail, it's going to save me. I'm going to reduce my waiting time down to zero, or at least that's like the hope. But for example, with analytics, there's a lot of pressure on the QA teams, and everyone is like, oh, but is this going to replace me? So how would you go about introducing new technologies when it comes to resistance in the actual teams? Because some people are quite honestly just worried about their jobs. Are they going to have a job? Is their job going to change? Are they going to be having the right skills? What is going to happen? So what is your view on that?
Well, I can only really speak from the sector that I work in, and in business to business communications, I see it being a very simple activity that's ongoing at the moment, and that is that there is recognition that enterprise support, paid for support, is becoming more and more the norm. And therefore, I'm in a position where if my large scale customers, or any of my customers for that matter, want that one-on-one technical account manager, support at that level, speaking to a human, having a relationship, then that comes as part of the enterprise support purchase package. And then customers can choose packages down the line. And what you end up with is a customer who says, actually, I don't want to buy any extra support. We provide them with a fully self-help AI web-based support model. That's what they have. That's what the expectation is, and we get great use out of our AI using that, through to the people who are delivering really great relationship management. That team grows and grows because we get more and more enterprise support customers, and therefore the people who were fearful of losing their jobs are actually finding what they're doing is they're climbing up through the business into more senior roles, dealing with customers that they have a relationship with rather than a voice on the end of the phone. And it's largely a win-win. And I think, you know, the analogy I use with people to explain it is it's the difference between somebody who decides to pay for the extended warranty on their new washing machine versus the person who says, oh, no, I won't do that. It's not good value for money. And then when the washing machine breaks down, wonders why, you know, nobody's going to come around and fix it. I think we have to recognize that, you know, we live in, you know, we live in a commercial world, and there nothing for nothing. But when somebody's paying for something, I want it to be first class.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I think it's all about kind of empowering humans, but I think again, thanks to the films we are watching, there's a lot of kind of misconception and different views. So no, that's very interesting. So
maybe we need the movie equivalent of a support desk agent. The customer who's putting in not enough effort or too much effort or is dissatisfied. Perhaps we should have the AI equivalent of termination.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I'm just going to pause my questions for now to let anyone give a chance to ask any questions if there are any questions. So I promise not to overrun this time, so I have to behave.
Dave, I've got a question. I was just wondering, you were talking about savings from implementing chatbots. Do you have some good concrete examples of savings? And indeed, I know you were also talking about people being worried about losing their jobs. Well, in all fairness, one hopes that eventually people do transition out of answering mundane calls. So do you have examples of clients where they have been able to take headcount out?
I have experienced myself organizations where I have replaced. There's kind of been an involvement of this in that I can remember back in the early 2000s that I replaced voice agents with chat agents who could do multiple chats, and then over time replaced those chat agents with chat bots, which meant that I no needed so many people dealing with live chat, and that was within businesses like I was working as a consultant at the time, but certainly within businesses such as AOL and Sky and Vodafone and companies like that. So I don't think I'm breaching any confidences there. I think everybody would recognize those companies have gone through that kind of process. I have now moved to a position where my own personal drive is not about looking to reduce the cost. It's really about delivering the highest level of support to the customers who are most valuable, and the appropriate level of support to the customers as they have purchased. What I am seeing more and more so is less about the introduction of AI to drive cost reduction, so much as a return to some large-scale offshoring in certain parts of the world where the very mundane kind of conversations are moving that way. And then the more complex enterprise style issues are remaining onshore and in-house and enabling people to grow their careers in that way. And I think the most likely advancement on from that is that offshore activity will then start to be ebbed away into AI.
Yeah, I really get that. Yeah. Great answer. Thanks.
Welcome. Thank you for the question.
And with regards to like ups, maybe, you know, so basically dealing, given these kind of premium customers time and, you know, loyalty and so on, is there anything, I guess, do you have any views on like what is the best way to go about finding the, well, where the opportunities are, and you know, how do you know basically where to kind of focus in order to, because I think we are moving from like reducing cost towards, can we actually provide more value and, you know, therefore gain more revenue, as opposed to just kind of cut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, within Ring Central, the piece that I've been really keen to drive over the last few months and will continue through this year is about getting the support operation involved in the prospect and customer lifecycle at the earliest possible opportunity, because that in itself, that's the answer that tells you the customers, potential customers' requirements are A, B, and C, and this is what will deliver the greater level of support, the customer, less customer effort, build those stronger relationships. And so we make it very much our policy that at the point that our solution engineering team are in talking to customers about how they might want the technical solution to work, we're part of that conversation, ensuring that we understand how best to support that customer and their requirements to then ensure that we're able to adapt our operation and our offering going forward.
Yeah, no, that's that is very, very interesting. So when it comes to just future, and actually I'll just again stop and say, if anyone has questions, just unmute anytime and just ask a question, so I don't kind of prevent anyone from asking questions, but I will kind of continue just because we have only 10 minutes left. So when it comes to just kind of what's coming and what, you know, what I think contact center industry has gone through a lot of changes, I think, from what I've seen actually from you know, the last at least 5 years, I think, have been very, very different, I think, to what has happened before. What are your predictions on like what's going to happen next in terms of what are going to be the changes we're going to see in this kind of industry going forward?
My goodness me, if only I knew the answers to that. I learned some time ago that making these predictions just ends up making me look foolish. So much changes so quickly. My feeling is, working within the kind of cloud communication world, my feeling is that across that technology and across particularly the outsource contact center environment, my view is that we're going to see a lot of market consolidation, and that will drive change in need. I think that high-end customers will demand more and more high-quality service, but will understand that that comes at a premium. And I think it will become very much more the norm for customers, more so business to business than consumer, but that customers will recognize that you know, they buy a service provision, and in exactly the same way as their own service offerings or their own products, you know, the value will be represented in the cost.
Yeah, no, that is.
Yeah, Danica, hi, Kevin here. How are you?
Kevin, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, well, it's sort of comment on a question, really. Are we seeing, is the question, are we seeing a de-emphasis on the drive to get the maximum number of calls wrapped up in an hour? Are we seeing a de-emphasis on that, and a move to emphasis on customer satisfaction and indeed the lifetime value of that customer? Because I think there is an opportunity for the market to change, to use the technology to deal with the simple questions and actually free up time for the human agents to do a lot more in-depth work with the customer. And I think that particularly plays into the distributed call center, where people aren't in an office, but they're working from home and they're prepared, you know, they want to work 3 hours one evening, and they may only take 2 calls, but they may have created a customer for life. And so I think we need to move away from the metric of how many calls in an hour to what effect does that have on the lifetime value. How we actually measure that is difficult, but any general comments on that?
Kevin, I think it's a great question. Sorry, I'm hearing myself back. Oh, that's better. And I now realise how difficult it has been for all of you having to listen to me for nearly an hour. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the idea of providing high quality service across that kind of disparately provided workforce is absolutely the way forward. And I think getting customers to recognise that the level of support we can provide is determined by the overall value of that customer. I don't think that's an unpleasant conversation to have, particularly within the B2B world. And you know, the support through technology elsewhere is the right way to go. And I haven't worked in a centre where I'm particularly worried about volumes or average handling time for some period of time, because for me the key measures, the ones that are of most value to me, are those that are around how quickly did I resolve the customer's issue and how thoroughly did I resolve the customer's issue. So it's as much about that the customer has spoken, it's taken X amount of time for us to deal with their issue. There weren't multiple interactions during that, and the issue was truly fixed. The customer didn't need to come back and talk to us about it again. And I would very much rather that my team members take a longer period of time to do it right first time than to move on the call metric and give us a false impression that we're doing a huge amount of work. It's kind of back to the world of work smarter rather than harder.
Very, very pleased to hear that. Great.
I think there's a lot to be said for like, this, agents have the job to answer all the questions, but a lot of the time, the issues have nothing to do with them. It could be that there is something in the business that needs to be fixed. It could be the product that, has a bug, like I can't log into the app. I mean, surely that's the dev team that should be notified by this. So I think there is a lot to be said for like, not, these people, this frontline team, there's so much they could do, but I think for the business to understand and kind of recognize, and I guess that's why transparency over all these conversations is very important, to understand where are my challenges. Is it with the people? Is it with, or whatever KPIs I'm using? And, am I hitting the targets there? Or is it actually elsewhere that I could? And I think this is I know a lot of businesses have the challenge to kind of quantify and basically convince, I guess, other departments that this is what needs to be done because it has come through the calls, through the conversations. This is what customers want. But I guess it has always been, a challenge to kind of merge the two.
Yeah, there's always a dynamic from different parts of the business, isn't there? We're working in a high-speed technology business, and the very, very clever people in our research and development team are working on new ideas and new products now, and that's what's exciting them. And so, I fully understand that when I go to them and say this particular element isn't working well and it's causing customers concern, that's less exciting to them than working on the newest idea. However, the alignment and the interface between my support function and that research function are absolutely essential, and that's how you continue to improve the customer's experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I only have one more question, so I'm going to give a chance to anyone else if they want to ask anything. So, and then I'll go on and ask about the remote working and just like COVID, I mean, some call centers have kind of even shut down, right, because of COVID. But I think some have gone kind of in the hybrid mode, maybe some even fully remote. So what's your view on like what is the best thing to do? If there is a best thing, I guess maybe there isn't, or like for going forward. Has this changed anything in terms of like how do you run call center, given that, you know, some people might be remote?
It's back to the question earlier of, how long does somebody stay in the right role for? It's got to come down to the individual. The short story I have to tell on this is, at my previous employer, I had a member of the team who came to me and said that she was moving to another part of the country, wasn't able to remain an employee any longer unless I could enable her to work from home. This was before COVID, just in the months before COVID. And I said, well, I'm really very sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go then. I've then moved company, and lo and behold, now, because we can facilitate all of this, because COVID taught us to do so, that young lady is now working for me again at Ring Central, and now guess what? She works remotely from home. So I think circumstances absolutely will dictate where people operate. And it will depend on whether you're running a 30-seat support desk, or whether you're running a 300-seat consumer contact center, or a 1,000-seat center. All of those things will determine how you want to run your business, because there's going to be little value in somebody having the overhead of a 1,000-seat contact center if they're going to let everybody work from home. My own rules, the way I've talked to my staff about it, has been very simple. You do what's right for you. You work where you want to work. However, there will be periods of time in any given month, quarter, that I'll say, look, we all need to get together, and we will all need to come into the office, and everybody will have to be flexible to do that. That's the way I see the world moving forward.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. COVID has changed so many kind of things that used to be default.
things that we said would be, I love this, things that we said would be impossible. So yeah, I have people come to me and they say, oh, you can't do that, that will never work. Well, yes, it will. It's about finding out what I would need to change to make it work. And we were told before COVID, because we didn't know anything about COVID, but we were told that we would never be able to all work fully remotely all of the time. Well, now we are. So the circumstance was forced upon us, but it's been proved that it can be done. In the 1960s, people thought President Kennedy was mad for suggesting to put people on the moon. Well, he found a way of doing it, or people around him found a way of doing it. So I think nothing's impossible. And I think if nothing else, COVID's been a great lesson for us that we can do anything that we want to do. We just have to find the way to do it.
Excellent. Well, on that lovely note, I think we can close today's session. So thank you, Dave, so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
For joining us as well. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye now.